talk about how you get back into running after having a baby. Hi, I'm Sarah Ann. I own MomTrainer.com. I am the mother of 3, a triathlete, and I've been training moms and helping them getting back into shape after having a baby for about 20 years. Here's my strategy. So first of all, we need to really address the elephant in the room, which was how your birth went. Every delivery is going to be very different. Every pregnancy is going to be very different. And so we have to have a routine that really respects that whole process. If you were able to exercise throughout your pregnancy, if you have a super easy vaginal delivery or a planned C-section, that recovery is going to be very different than if you were on the couch or on forced bed rest. If you had a really brutal delivery, either way, sunny side up or vaginal delivery, especially if you had an emergency C-section, those are going to be 2 very different things. So I think the first things first is you need to respect that this is a recovery process and that regardless of how baby came out, there has been some kind of trauma to your core, your pelvic floor, your back, your pelvis, all of that. So take a deep breath and I'm going to help you through it. Number 1, we're going to establish a good foundation of core and pelvic floor and breath work. I'm just going to assume that when you started running, when maybe you were like in high school or after college, before you started running, you didn't necessarily focus on how to breathe. It was just something that came along with it, right? But for postpartum, it's going to be the foundation that you absolutely need to start with. We need our breath to be the Pilates breathing of in through your nose, out through your mouth. And we're gonna engage your diaphragm too. So just like you're doing in Pilates or in strength training, or if you come to any of my classes, or if you trained with me, you will know that I'm gonna have you breathe in through your nose, fill your diaphragm, relax your pelvic floor, and then you're gonna exhale, pelvic floor to sternum, breathe out through your mouth like you're breathing through a straw. That is so important because it minimizes the impact on your pelvic floor. So you're gonna use that when you are training and when you are running. So that's just like level 1. And honestly, you can start that as soon as baby's out and then you're back home from the hospital. So that's what we're gonna start with, just developing that really strong foundation of core and pelvic floor. Typically, I will have everybody start from your heel sides, your pelvic floor training, your diaphragmatic breathing. We'll work from laying on your back to all fours to sitting upright, and then we'll start adding in exercises. But we always start with the breath work first because it is so important. If you go right into impact without really focusing on minimizing the impact on your pelvic floor, you're gonna end up peeing your pants or something worse could happen. Not to scare you, but it's really important. Every single physical therapist that I have worked with, every single client that I trained in the past 20 years of training benefits from that. So that comes first. Number 2, we're gonna focus on pelvic stability. So when you are pregnant, you probably tend to walk around with your ribs out, your pelvis is tilted, maybe you already have a kid and you're carrying one kid to one side, your pelvis is typically off kilter. So if you think of like a bucket of water, so dump the water out the front and dump the water out the back, dump the water out the side to side. So just kind of finding that neutral pelvis can be really, really helpful. I have a foundation in Pilates, so I always include that in my training, regardless of my current client is a runner or not. It's just something that comes in handy. Because if you start adding impact to a pelvis that is here, here, or here, it's not going to feel good. Your joints are going to have to compromise and your pelvic floor probably isn't gonna feel super great. So we always wanna make sure that we're establishing that nice neutral pelvis and we are just respecting what happened during pregnancy. We tend to walk around in an anterior pelvic tilt. So we're either thrusting forward or we're in a posterior pelvic tilt. So you're sitting on your tailbone. That can cause a lot of pelvic floor issues as well. So before we add impact, we want to do exercises like glute bridges, clamshells, things that really focus on getting your pelvis nice and strong and really establishing a good healthy joint connection. So if you think of like your hips as your ball and sockets, making sure those are nice and strong before we add impact. And then we'll go into loading, which is really important because we have to strength train during pregnancy so that way we can avoid injury. I prefer to always start with your back, your glutes, your legs. Make sure the posterior chain is really strong because as you're running, we tend to tilt forward. And a lot of that work goes into your quadriceps, tightens your chest, doesn't necessarily respect the position that your pelvis wants to be in. So what we do is we train everything behind you. So you have that solid base, your glutes are mobilizing, your hamstrings are working, your calves are really working. So that way we're not getting shin splints, we're not getting plantar fasciitis, we're not having knee issues, we're not having low back. That all tend to come up if you start running too soon without doing these first. So always making sure we're loading posterior. I also like to really focus on, if we think of the planes of motion, there's 3. Sagittal is here. That's how we run. That's how we live most of our life. So when we're training, we're going to move in the frontal or coronal or transverse planes of motion. So that way we're nice and balanced. So we'll typically do exercises like side to side walking or curtsy lunges. We'll do a lot of upper body training to also, because we're here, we kind of want to fight this movement pattern that we tend to get stuck into. So I always like to add those into training too. Then I'll start adding in contralateral movements. So for example, lunging to one side, pressing up overhead, and compound exercises. So that way you're engaging a little bit more core, we're focusing on your balance, we're doing like kind of weird movements and seeing how the body adapts. Then from there we can progress load. So that means making those weights heavier, making your workouts a little bit more intense that way. So that's another way so we can increase your exercise volume to make you stronger before we add impact. And now it comes to impact. I always love to sprinkle in just a little bit to see how things are feeling throughout training, especially if someone is trying to get back into running, because running is all impact. It is that pound, 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 pound. Great for your fascia, but we want to make sure that we have a nice solid system before we add impact to a pelvic floor that is recovering from pregnancy. We can go in and on about pelvic organ prolapse and diastasis recti and all of those things, but when it comes to running, we want to minimize all of the impact on those things. Feel free to check out my blog. I have a ton of information on that, which I can go into later if you like. But really focusing on the low impact first, seeing how it feels. Because a lot of times when I start working with someone, especially if they were an athlete and they never really, focused on Pilates or any kind of resistance training, we want to make sure you're doing that mid-foot strike. So if this is your foot, you're not pounding directly on your heels, you're not running on your toes. We're having that nice solid push off position. So that way you can get those nice springing legs without putting any additional pressure on your knees and also minimizing the impact on your pelvis and your low back and your sacrum. So I always like to add in just a little bit of plyo, and then we add the intensity from there. Then we'll start adding some hills, then we'll start adding some distance, and then we start adding the sprints to make you faster. So before you are even going out there, you have a nice solid foundation. Typically, most of the physical therapists that I've worked with will always recommend that you start on a 1-to-2 ratio. So that means you're running for 30 seconds, you're walking for 30 seconds. If you've had a rougher delivery, I would recommend that you go to a 1-to-3. So 30 seconds, super light jogging, 90 seconds of walking and recovery. You're gonna do that for like 5 to 10 minutes, take a nice long recovery, stretch, and see how you feel. And this is where any kind of like journaling or notes, all of my clients, we have a big long document so that way we can stay in touch throughout this training process. So if I hear from a client like, ooh, I kind of leaked after, then we're gonna peel back, we're gonna see what happens, and then we're gonna try again once the issue has really been addressed. Maybe we're running in a way that's like not super efficient. Maybe we are really focusing on the rotation without that proper breathing mechanics that is engaging the transverse abdominis, holding our spine up nice and long. Lots of different kind of tricks we can try. So those are the foundations that I like to start from. 1, you have a nice, strong, stable base of your core, your pelvic floor, your breathing. You have your pelvic and lower body stability. Your whole body is strong because we're doing everything we can to minimize injury and impact. Then we have resistance training, some plyo training to make you faster, and resistance when you run, and then eventually speed. So that's how we get there. I hope this answers your question. If you have more, feel free to message me directly. Thank you for watching, and you can go to MomTrainer.com for more.